It is so good to be here this morning and be with you. I just am excited about this new series. I feel like that the idea behind this is very, very powerful, and it's something that God could use to bring some change into our lives that we might need to see happen. If you've been married or are married before, you stood in front of someone and spoke to someone, and you spoke some words about some final things, some things that were absolute. You spoke in absolute terms. This wasn't wishy-washy. You know, it wasn't kind of maybe sort of kind of talking. It was, there was a crisp, clear line in the sand. When you walk down that aisle as a bride, when you stand on the stage or on the steps of a courthouse or wherever you are, when you stand there and you join hands with each other and you repeat the wedding vows after the pastor or the presenter, whoever is marrying you, when you do that, you say some pretty important words, like things like "till death do us part," and that's you know, I haven't ever signed any papers before that said "till death do us part," except for a marriage license, and we got married in New York, so we had pages and pages of things because had to pay the government to do. Anyway, that's another. So we signed a lot of papers and that kind of thing. But there's whenever you're doing that, you're not just saying this isn't a 15-year mortgage you're taking out. This isn't a 30-year mortgage. This is for the rest of my life. That's what you're saying in that moment. And whenever you are asked to repeat, you don't get to just nod your head or say, "I do" or "I will" after this. You say after the pastor, "for better, for worse, for richer." And what do people say? Can you believe you stand in front of people and say, "I'm going to commit myself for the rest of my life to this person for poor"? Because, see, we don't imagine in our minds we're talking about poor. We're thinking the richer, but the poor, no, that's not going to happen. And in sickness and in, I don't know why they switched that one up on us, but anyway, they do. In sickness, and I guess maybe get that one out of the way first. Let's go ahead and get that sickness thing out there first. But the truth is, in that ceremony, there's a sense of finality. There's a sense of absoluteness. There's a sense of concreteness. There's a sense in which somebody is saying, in fact, it is even stated, from this day forward. From this day forward, the rest of your life is going to be changed. It's going to be different. It's not going to be you walking alone. You're walking together. And you said, "till death do us part." Now, today isn't a series or a message today on marriage, okay? But it is a message on serving the Lord. And here's what I do believe about this concept of from this day forward. To me, it represents a few things. And from a spiritual standpoint, it represents a few things to me. And that is that not everything that you commit to should be from this day forward and forever. In fact, I believe there should only be a few things that we make that kind of a commitment to. But those few things will literally determine the outcome of our life. Because there are some things that if you are just experimenting with, then it means that you are only temporarily engaged, and that it means that you are feeling it out, you are checking it out, you're taking it for a ride around the block, and you're going to see, is this something I really want to do or not do? But there are some things in life that are absolutely worth us saying from this day forward. Now, again, I don't recommend a ton of those things, but there's a few things that we need to resolve in our minds. And one of those things, I believe, is that we will serve the Lord. And I just want to ask you this question. Have you made that clear line in the sand declaration from this day forward? Has there been a point in time in your life where you have said to yourself, to God, and to anybody else who cares to know, from this day forward, I will serve the Lord? And if you haven't, then I'm glad you're here today. If you have, I'm glad you're here today, because I want to affirm what you've done, and I want to encourage you to understand the value of that. And if you haven't done that, I want to encourage you to think seriously about this being the day that you do that, or choosing a day when you will do that, because it is a difference maker. Now, we're going to talk about a few areas over this series. We're not going to talk about a lot because there's not a lot to be talked about. I'm not saying that I'm going to share every area that I think is a convictional area, but a few areas over the next few weeks that are convictional areas. And this idea of choosing to serve the Lord, we're going to talk about what does serving the Lord look like? What does it mean? But we're also going to talk about when you make that choice, the difference that it makes in our lives. And because whenever we really, really mean that in our hearts, and we lay it down and we say, God, I have chosen to serve you, and that's where my allegiance is, then what we're also saying is, for better, for worse, I'm going to serve you. For richer, for poorer, I'm going to serve you. And whether it's in sickness or in health, I'm going to serve you. And whether whatever the next things you could list there would be, whatever that is, what is not up for grabs is whether or not you are going to serve the Lord. So from this day forward, I don't know what will happen. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what is coming my way. But what I can tell you, this is one thing I do know, and that is that whatever comes my way, I will serve the Lord. And that is a declaration, a commitment that is tremendously important for us to consider making in our lives if we've never done so. I want to talk just briefly as kind of a preface to this, a couple things. One is there is a difference between what I would call convictions that are for everyone and for every person, and then personal convictions. Now, there are things that you might hold as a personal conviction that are very, very important to you, and I would say it would be wrong, if that's truly a personal conviction, wrong for you to do. But it might not be wrong for someone else to do, because it's something God has convicted you of, and there may be special reasons for that. There might be special situations for that to be the case. And so all of us, I believe, should own a few personal convictions that are things that we would say from this day forward before God, I have chosen to do this or to not do this because I feel like God has impressed it in my heart. That's for me. It may not be for anybody else, but that is for me. And then there are what I would call general convictions, which are really for every person who takes faith seriously. And those are the ones that I'm going to deal with. I want to give an example, though, of a personal conviction briefly to you. And I want to preface it by saying this. That is that I'm going to tell you about an area that I personally felt convicted about myself, and that I made a commitment to the Lord in. But I also want to tell you that this is a very narrow area, and that it was something that this was very personal for me, and this is an area where this is not a judgment on anybody else, and also it's not just because I've done these two things very well does not mean that I've lived this perfect life and that I haven't disappointed God, myself, and other people many times. I have. But this is an example of a personal conviction that I believe God gave to me as a young person, as a growing child, that God has helped me to be able to live that out. And if I had broken that conviction. I don't believe it meant I would go to hell, but what it would mean is that it was that I had violated something between me and God, and something a commitment that I had made, and that's in a personal way, I would need to remedy that between us. When I was 10 years old, I mentioned this recently. When I was 10 years old, I was with my father in a car accident. He was in a speaking engagement, and he was coming back home. It was Memorial Day weekend. It was actually Memorial Day. And there was a drunk man driving on the highway the wrong direction and with no lights on. And we did not see him in time. My father did not see him in time. And so there was a crash that ensued. And through the results of that, the next morning, my father passed away. I knew at 10 years old that the person driving the other car was drunk. That the reason they were driving the wrong direction, the reason that they had no lights on, and at nighttime, was because they were drunk. And so from that very moment on, I had a repulsion personally against anything that would alter somebody's thinking. If it had the capacity to alter her thinking, then I wanted nothing to do with it. I was just sort of something I made up my mind, even right around the time of my father's death, at 10 years old, as much as you could do that at that time. And so that was something that was pretty seared into me from that moment. And that was not necessarily even spiritual. That was probably very practical. But I remember when I was in 6th grade, which was just a year or so after that, my mom had moved to South Florida, and I was in a Christian school, and there was I don't remember if it was a chapel speaker or they came to our room or whatever, but I was in 6th grade, and it was somebody who was talking about, they were talking about making decisions that would alter your life one way or another. And part of it they were talking about was habits that people develop. And so they had this little card, and I can't remember the whole presentation, but I do remember the card. I don't still have the card, but I very clearly can picture it. They had this little card that on the card you could sign your name, and it was a little pledge. It was a pledge that you would never, and I don't know, there may have been other things on it. The two things that I remember from it is that you would never smoke because of the health hazards related to that, and that you would never drink alcohol. Well, for me, that drinking alcohol was a no-brainer. It was like a kind of thing. But I remember that I actually signed my name to that, and I remember in doing so, I did it with some thought. Was careful in that, even as careful as you can be at 6th grade. And so, but probably a little more serious than some people because of what had happened within a year previous with my father's death. And so, so I signed that card. Now, listen, I need to tell you this. Smoking cigarettes will not send you to hell. It'll just make you smell like you've been there. No, that's an old line I heard from a preacher, okay? I robbed that from some guy. But he was, so I don't believe, if you're struggling with smoking or smoking's a thing, I don't, that's not going to send you to hell, okay? I don't think it's a heaven or hell issue. But what I would say is, it was something that I felt as a child. I understood that was something that was not going to be helpful to me to do, and so I made that commitment. It was probably extremely easy for her to make me the commitment to not drink. I think I'd maybe even already made that up in my mind. But what I would say is this: over the years, there has been very few occasions. In fact, maybe only even one. I mentioned it Wednesday night. Only one occasion where, at 16 years old, I had a small temptation to drink because of the group that I was with. And it probably wasn't because alcohol seemed good, but just because of the group and wanting to fit in, that I had a small temptation. I would say it was a small one, but it was one that I had to walk away from and do that. But to the best of my knowledge, and unless somebody has spiked something of mine over the years, I have never intentionally ever tasted alcohol in my life. And it's my intention to die without tasting alcohol. Now, does that make me more spiritual than anybody else? No. And it doesn't, and that's not my ticket to heaven. Let me just tell you that isn't. And I don't believe the Bible says that you can never have a drink or anything like that. But it does speak against drunkenness and those kinds of things. So, but that's just that was a personal conviction that I felt inclined to accept, to make my own, and I did. I have lived out that commitment. Now 60 years old, and I've never smoked a cigarette, and I've never tasted alcohol. Now, I've probably smoked a few cigarettes from some secondhand smoke, but anyway, but I never intentionally smoked a cigarette. But I will tell you this. I'm just being completely honest with you. I am a person who likes how certain things feel or look or whatever. I mean, there's a certain kind of coffee that I like. I'm trying to remember what it is. I'm trying to think. What is there? Does anybody help me out? What kind of coffee? Oh, Dunkin' Donuts. Yes, Dunkin' Donuts. I really like a cup of coffee, and so I understand people who have kind of addictions to certain little things here, whatever, because it's like, well, there's just something about sitting in a certain environment with a cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee that is like, well, it's just hard to beat, And so I relate to people having little patterns, habits, addictions even, or whatever, to things, because I think I probably have some of that in me. I can think things. Look, I remember, I got this probably from my mom, but I remember my mom, who was, I highly doubt, my older brothers would know for sure, but I highly doubt my mom ever made over $25,000 a year. Like, I don't think she ever earned more than that in her lifetime, in a year's time. But I don't think she ever felt like a poor person, okay? But but I remember we were sitting in a restaurant. This was like probably 15 years ago, something like that, and so about 5 or 10 years before she passed away. And she and Vanjie and I were sitting there, and we'd all ordered water. I don't care to have lemon in my ice water, and that's just, I got a lot of little ticks, but anyway, but that's one of them. I don't care for it. No problem. They can bring it. I'll just give it to Vanjie because she likes to make lemonade out of her water. And so Vanjie had her lemon, and Mom had her lemon in her glass, and Vanjie was saying, I wish I had another. She said, Rod, you should have gotten like a lemon because then I could have gotten yours, or something, something along that line. And so my mom said, well, here, you can have my lemon. So she handed Vanjie her lemon, or held her cup up or whatever. I said, well, Mom, we can get more lemons if you want a lemon for you. She goes, no, I don't like lemon in mine either. I just like how it looks. I'm like, it's just, so I don't know whether I got that from her, but I kind of like, this is a confession I'm making right here, but I can hardly stand the smell of some cigars. I worked around a guy that smoked this cigar, and I'm not sure what kind he made, but it was rough. It was pretty tough. You kind of hold your nose when you walk through. But I've smelled some pretty sweet smelling cigars too. And then, being a coffee drinker, there's been a few times I've seen somebody smoking a cigar, and I thought, that looks like the lemon on the water, kind of, that looks kind of cool. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, it's not a sin to smoke a cigar. What if I smoked a cigar? And I'm like, Rod, you signed a piece of paper, whenever you were 11 years old, that you would not smoke. And so, truthfully, if I had not signed that piece of paper, there might be about, a half a dozen times in a year that I would smoke a cigar. But I've chosen not to because I feel like I made a commitment to not do that. Now, I know there are foolish commitments. I don't think that's a foolish commitment. I don't think it's a bad commitment. I think it's a good one. And honestly, Vanjie probably divorced me if I came home and said I'd smoked a cigar or something. No, I'm just kidding. But she'd be like, well, what are you, it's a shocker. Like, what are you doing? But the truth of the matter is, I don't think that's a sin, okay? But what I would say is, because I have made a commitment from that day forward at 11 years old to not partake in the use of tobacco or alcohol, that's something to live out. Now, I can't say I've lived out every other commitment in my life perfectly on that. I cannot say that. But that is a commitment that God has allowed me to really actually take to the bank, so to speak, and say and that's a personal conviction. Again, I share that because it's not something I would impose on anybody else and say that's what you need to do, and that's a commitment you need to make. But it's a personal conviction. But I do believe it's important for everybody to have some personal convictions. Some things that it could be that everybody in the whole world does, but you've just made a commitment before God that you won't. And of course, we know that there are certain things that are true for all of us, such as our belief in Jesus being God. If someone were to come, I believe the vast majority here today already have the conviction, if you're a follower of Christ, that if someone were to come and say, listen, it will be impossible for you to do this or this or this unless you deny the deity of Christ. I believe that the vast majority of here would be willing. Nobody wants to. Nobody's signing up for it, but would be willing to die at the stake over the deity of Christ. Because we know that what we're doing in that moment, if we deny Christ, we've denied our hope. We've denied everything. We've denied the very essence of our life. We've denied eternal life. We've denied everything that matters. So we're not going to do that. And that's the kind of things that I'm going to be talking about here today and in the weeks up. So I'm going to ask you to grab that sheet beside you, and let's look at this story found in Joshua chapter 24. And this is, now, just to give you a little bit of backdrop real quickly, this is toward the end of Joshua's life or his ministry, where he was wrapping things up. They were dispersing the property, the promised land. They had taken it over. They were beginning to kind of divvy it out. People were settling down now in the promised land. They had come from Egypt as slaves. They had wandered the 40 years in the wilderness. Now they had come in, they had occupied the land, and they were settling down. And Joshua has this very serious conversation with them. In fact, if you go back up and read the verses prior to where we start at verse 14, he tells them what God told him to tell them, tell the people of Israel. And he reminds them, Tim, you prayed about it this morning, about whenever they were at the sea, and they were gathered there, and the sea was in front of them, the mountains were on one side, and the army of Egypt was coming behind them, and so they had no escape. It looked impossible. But Joshua reminded them of the things that God did for them, how he separated the water, how he put a cloud between the Egyptians, and then how he separated the water. They walked to safety, and then how he let the water come and destroy Pharaoh and his elite army at that time. And so he reminds them of this. And so he's just been reminding them of these things. And now we come to verse 14. I want you to just listen carefully as we go through here. There's a lot for us to grab. It says, "Now fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord." Now this phrase, serve the Lord, is our key phrase here, and you're going to see it throughout this passage, serve the Lord. Now, I want you to catch this, and I'm going to hopefully come back and be able to share. I kind of gave an introduction to the series, which ate up some of our sermon time, but what I want to do is come back to this, because this is kind of the essence of what serving the Lord is. There's three things mentioned here. Fear the Lord, so we're going to break that down, talk about that. Serve the Lord with faithfulness, be consistent, be you know what faithful is. It is critical to a relationship with God, and then throw away the gods that your ancestors worshipped in Egypt and beyond Euphrates. And so these are the three things we're going to come back and talk about after we get through this. But let's go on down. Verse 15. But, Joshua speaking here, if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose. And I kind of wish you had circled that word choose. Because here's what I have to be faithful and tell you this. You have a choice in the matter. You know, there are different systematic theologies out there, and there's some that say that you don't have a choice in the matter. It wouldn't matter whether you want to serve God or don't serve God. He's going to make you serve me if he's chosen you to do that, and if he hasn't, you're going to hell no matter what. I don't buy that. That's a systematic theology I do not buy, because there's way too many choices in the Bible. Adam and Eve had a choice. They had a choice. Here, Joshua is this great, fearless leader of God and God's people, leader for God and God's people. He's standing before them, and he's saying to the people, you have a choice. You have a choice. You better choose who you're going to serve. And so if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose. So I wanted to say this to you this morning. You have a choice. You have a choice in this matter. Whenever you stand, you know, we kind of laugh and make jokes about shotgun weddings and all that. I noticed you guys didn't think it was funny, but anyway, I mean, you know, but they're not really funny. But there's, you know, shotgun wedding deal is probably kind of a thing of the past for sure. But we do know that sometimes people may be a little coerced into. But in this culture we live in today, you're standing here, we believe, making your decision, groom, your decision, bride, to say, from this day forward, you're making a choice. And I'm just going to tell you, your choice doesn't save you. God's the only one that can save you. What Jesus has done is the only one that can save you. But your choice allows you to receive what it is that God has done for you. Your choice doesn't save you, but your choice puts you in a position to receive what God has determined, he's predetermined for you to have, because he's predetermined it for everyone, that they would come to him and know him. And you get into that by making that choice. And so let's go on. Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Now, what Joshua is doing here is he's using his influence. He's leading by example, and he's using his influence. And I'm going to tell you, God gives you influence for you to use it. Not abuse, but for you to use it. And to use it for good. And he's using his influence for good here. He's simply saying, in case anybody had a question, kind of hard for me to believe any of the people standing here had a question about whether Joshua had already made this decision or not. But in case anybody is wondering where I stand on this, I'm going to go on record here right in front of you, and here's what I want to tell you. As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Now, you might go, well, how can he make that decision for his household? You know what? He can't make the personal decision for each person in his household, but what he can do is say, as far as I'm concerned, the influence I have within the position I have as a leader of my family and my home, we will serve the Lord. And what we can do, you know, as a father, as a husband, what I believe it is very, very important for us to make some decisions of what will and will not transpire within our household. I can just promise you, if you come into my house and you start using foul language, we're going to have a conversation, and we're probably going to have it moving our way quickly out to the porch and maybe to your car door, and I'll be opening the car door, and I'm going to say, I love you, I care about you, and I want to see you in heaven, but don't step another foot inside of my house talking in front of my family like that. And you might say, well, that's very rude of you. Well, it could be rude, it could be whatever, but it is my responsibility to protect what God has given to me. And if I don't, then the Bible says that I'm worse than an infidel, someone who's actually rebellious toward God. That doesn't mean you have to be ugly and mean. It just means you have to say, this, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. You know, you can't determine that your kids will follow God. You can't make that decision for them. They will make that decision. But what you can do is you can say, while you're in this house, there are going to be some God-honoring things that occur here. There are some things. And I don't think it's not just about rules, because all rules create rebellion. But there is grace, and there is the opportunity. But I need to tell you, it's your responsibility to say, this is a place that will be safe. This is a place where people aren't going to yell and scream at each other, where people are not going to cuss each other out, where people are not going to throw things at each other, where this is not going to occur in this household. This is a household of peace. And we're going to, and you say, well, you can't always control everything. You can't always control everything, but you better work at getting it under control. And so Joshua is saying, you know, maybe every servant in his house and every person who worked there for him, every child of his, didn't necessarily perfectly follow God, but to the best of his ability, he was going to make sure this was a place where God was honored. This is a place where when people come here, they know and understand we're not going to do something that's going to dishonor God. We're not going to do something that is disrespectful, dishonoring to God. And so the way that's lived out is much more in the proactive side. I'm talking about the side of, you know, setting some boundaries and that kind of thing. But it's also set out in the side of love and grace. Hopefully your home is a home, not just a home where people don't do bad things, but where they do great things, where they do good things, where people are loved on, people are encouraged, people are helped, people are prayed for. It's a place where God is celebrated, where he is worshiped, where he is honored. And we set the example of that. Joshua, he's saying, simply going, I just want to go on record that as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to serve the Lord. I'm going to serve the Lord. And I'm gonna make sure that that's evident within my household. Then the people answered, "Far be it from us to forsake the Lord to serve other gods." You know, have you ever noticed it's really easy to kind of go along with the crowd? I mean, Josh is up here declaring, "Oh, no, not us. We would never do that." The children of Israel, if you know anything about them, they have a pretty good history of forgetting what God has done pretty quickly. "Oh, no, we're far be it. But then they go on, and they state, so they're thinking about this as to why. "It was the Lord our God himself who brought us and our parents up out of Egypt from that land of slavery." So they're remembering, we came from slavery, and we've been set free. And God is the one who brought us here, and he's the one who set us free. And he performed those great signs before our eyes. He protected us on our entire journey and among all the nations through which we traveled. And the Lord drove out before us all the nations, including the Amorites, who lived in the land. We too will serve the Lord because he is our God. So they gave reasons why. You better believe we're in on this serving the Lord thing ourselves. He delivered us from slavery. He performed great signs before our eyes. He protected us on the journey, and he drove out other nations before us. So they had very concrete reasons as to why they were going to serve the Lord. And I do want to say this. It is really, really important for us to review and remember what God has done for us. You know, we sit in miracle territory right here every Sunday morning because there are some people in this place, in fact, everybody who's a follower of Christ, but some stories are a little more dramatic than others. But there are some people sitting here this morning and whose lives were enslaved. They were a slave to an addiction. They were slave to an addiction. They were slave to maybe workaholism, maybe this, maybe that, maybe the other, whatever it is. But they were enslaved by something, and God has set them free, set you free. And to remember that. And you know, sometimes I have to sit down, and sometimes I'll, even with the yellow pad, I don't know why I like yellow pads, but I do. But anyway, I'll sit down with a yellow pad, and I'll start listing out some of the things. And I actually have a life book where I can go back and review some of the mountains God has moved for me personally, and some for us as a church over the years, and review that and go, well, my goodness, look at what God has done. Why would I doubt his goodness today? Why would I even consider that he isn't alive and well in the one that I should pour my allegiance into? So these guys, they kind of pulled out their diary, and they look back, and they're going, man, we came from slavery. We've been set free. And we saw the signs and the miracles. We've heard, and if we didn't see them, we heard about these signs and miracles that transpired. We literally saw him protect us along the journey from enemies. And we saw people being driven out that were much greater than us. Many of these people were walking around the walls of Jericho, probably wondering, what in the world is Joshua doing now? What is he doing in this situation? How in the world is walking around these walls going to get us inside, going to give the city to us? But they saw the miracle of what God did, and they believed it. And so, going on to verse 19, it says, Joshua said to the people, now this is, these people are going, we're in, we're all in, we're here, we're with you, man, we're serving God too. And then Joshua says to the people, you're not able to serve the Lord. Oh, we're not able to? What's the deal? Well, let's listen to what he says. He said, he's a holy God. He's a jealous God. He will not forgive your rebellion and your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, he will turn and bring disaster on you and make an end of you after he has been good to you. In other words, he's saying, God will discipline you. You don't make this. What he's really telling is, be really careful about what you declare a conviction to be. Be extremely careful about it. Because if you declare something before God and then turn your back on it, you got to understand God has a memory too. And it works. And he heard your commitment, and he saw your lack of commitment, and you're going to suffer discipline. It's just like, your kid comes, you say, hey, everybody, we got 30 minutes. Everybody go clean your own room. Clean your room and get it ready, and then we're going to do this. And so they all go, oh, okay, no problem. 30 minutes later, they all agreed to it. 30 minutes later, you go, and they're sitting in the middle of their mess on the floor playing. I thought you had 30 minutes. You said you were going to clean your room. What are you doing? Huh? What? You know? Almost act like they weren't there or something. They didn't hear it. How often, it's easy for us to say things to God, and especially sometimes even when our back is against the wall. This case, their back wasn't against the wall. And you say, well, why is Joshua making this a big deal? These people have been following along. They've seen this land taken over. Because Joshua is not going to live a whole lot longer at this point. And people are settling into their households. They're not going as this big convoy anymore. They're settling into their different areas. They're building their homes. They're establishing their communities. They're building their cities. And so he needs to be really clear with them. You have a decision to make. We're not going to be going out and conquering more cities right now. You're settling down. You're going to be establishing your home, your family, and you need to know what it is you're going to do. Are you going to serve God or not? And so he did not want them making a light-hearted decision. God will bring judgment on you. You'll bring it on yourselves even if you make this light-hearted commitment and are not serious about it. Verse 21, people said to Joshua, no, we hear what you're saying. We will serve the Lord. Then Joshua said, you are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen to serve the Lord. I mean, he's nailing this thing down. He's going, you just spoke these words, and God knows whether you meant them or not. You're going to be a witness. Those words can come back to haunt you. So be careful. And I would say this, too. Be very careful about what you commit yourself to. But if you commit yourself something before God, be very careful about walking away from that commitment, too. Verse 23. Now then, said Joshua, throw away the foreign gods that are among you and yield your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel. Two things there. Throw away the stuff that you're holding on to that's in opposition to you serving God well. You know, and it's amazing they're at this point, and he's still having to tell them to throw away gods. You know, they've been following. They've been watching these God miracles all along. They've been watching these signs of God. They've been realized that they're free. They're free from slavery, but they've been holding on to some stuff. Why don't you say to yourself? Don't say it to anybody else today. Just say it. You can say it out loud, or you can say it quietly. It'll be okay to talk to yourself because I'm giving you permission. Okay? Nobody will think you're crazy. It's really easy for me to hold on to stuff. It's really easy for me to hold on to stuff. The stuff that actually is in opposition to the direction God's taking me, that God's calling me, that God wants me to do. It's in opposition to the honoring of God. But it's really easy to hold on to stuff. Most of you don't have false images in your house. But almost all of us struggle with some idols that we want to hold on to. And so Joshua's being really clear. He's going, look, this idea of serving the Lord, this isn't an attack on. This isn't something you add to your already life. This is it'd be like, you know, you're standing here now, you know, and I hadn't read any of these stories, but I've seen the headlines, a couple of these stories. Probably I don't know if I should have read them or not, but anyway, where someone is standing here at the altar, and the bride read all the text messages of the groom cheating on her, right in the wedding. Now, what I should have read it because I don't know. Surely she didn't go ahead and marry the guy. I don't know. I mean, I just saw the headline. You know, bride reveals text of cheating groom, groom to be on wedding day, and I'm like, it sounded like it was right in the wedding ceremony from what it's like. You stand there now. Surely they didn't go. Now I'm going to go ahead and come up here and I'm going to commit myself to you for the rest of your life. Now that's what you call when you make that commitment. We know what you're saying is forsaking. What does it say? Forsaking all others. So if your ex-girlfriend or boyfriend's at the wedding, you have to look out and go, forsaking you. I'm forsaking you. I mean, forsaking is tough. That's rough. I mean, that means like, Hey, you're homeless. You're out there to hang. You're on your own. I'm forsaking you because I'm marrying this person. I'm forsaking you. So whenever you say to God, I'm going to serve you, God, what Joshua was saying is, you know what that means? That means you're standing on the curb and waving goodbye to some other things. See you later. See you later. Can't be doing that. Can't be doing this. And so we'll catch you later. And in fact, not catch you later. Good riddance. I'm forsaking you. That means I won't be back. That means I won't be seeing you. I won't be calling you. I'm forsaking you. So when we commit to something, there's always a sense in which we're leaving something else behind. And Joshua said, if you're serious about this, serving the Lord, then I need to tell you, you got to do this to that stuff you're hanging on to. You know, and I could name a list. I could do a list here. You know the biggest problem I have with lists? First of all, they're extremely inadequate. And oftentimes they even make the wrong focus. Here's what I want to tell you. Before God, you know. And then I would miss the one that is yours, and you go, well, see, mine wasn't on that list. But you know what it is that stands between you and a full-fledged, from this day forward, kind of commitment to God. It's saying, God, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to give you my life, and I am going to, this between now and the end of this life, I'm going to serve you. And I hope to grab your hand when I step into eternity and walk with you throughout eternity. I am letting some things go because from this day forward, I will serve the Lord. I will serve the Lord. And Joshua's making it very clear. He's going, hey, throw away. He didn't say pack them up and put them in storage. Whenever the new Hollywood storage units come out in town, you know, go put them over there so they're out of your sight, out of your. No, he didn't say. He said throw them. That means take them to the dump. You know, get rid of them. Throw away the foreign gods that are among you and yield your hearts to the Lord. That yield thing, every time I see that word yield, some jokes you should forget, but some, it's like some good jokes I can't remember. It seems like I always remember the bad jokes. Did I make the mistake of trying to tell my brother Randy? Now, those of you who heard my brother Randy speak here, you know he is good at jokes, okay? And so then I make the mistake going, hey, Randy, did you hear the joke about the other? About a third of the way through, I'm kind of spinning out. And he goes, man, you're terrible telling jokes, Rod. He goes, you can't even remember half of them, whatever. But I remember some jokes are just bad ones. So I'm going to tell you this bad joke, okay? The old farmer, he wasn't used to interstate, and so he came down on the interstate, and when he did, he ran right into somebody in his old pickup truck, ran right into him on the interstate. And so they had a wreck. Cops came up and everything. And the person's over telling the cop, man, he says, he didn't even yield. See, there's a yield sign. See that yield sign? He didn't even yield. And the old farmer, he heard him accusing him of that. And he came over and he goes, I did too. He said, I yelled 3 times and they didn't even slow down. Yelled? Okay. I quite get the accent right, did I? They yelled 3 times and they didn't even slow down. So, look, here's what yield. Yeah, bad joke. I know. But here's what I want to tell you, and that is this: yield means you give the other person the right of way. You give it. You give. He said, yield your hearts. Yield your hearts to the Lord. God, this is what I'd like to do, but your word says I need to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to yield. I'm going to see. You yield in traffic just because that's the way the laws are laid out. You yield to God because his ways are better than our ways. His ways are greater than our ways. But man, sometimes from our perspective, I don't know if you've ever done this or not. I have a bad history of arguing with God. And I don't mean that disrespectfully or anything else, but just sometimes just really trying to get my head around, God, what are you trying to do? I mean, can't you see this? I mean, this has got to be a great plan, God. Why wouldn't you take this plan? And I forget in those arguments that God's perspective is aerial. He sees not only time, but he sees eternity. He not only sees what's good for me in this moment that doesn't look like it's good for me, but he sees what's good for me for eternity. And so whenever I really believe that he is the God of the Bible, he's the God that has revealed himself to us through the person of Jesus Christ, then it's a lot easier for me to yield my heart to him. Let's finish reading here. People said to Joshua, we'll serve the Lord our God and obey him. On that day, Joshua made a covenant for the people, and there at Shechem, he reaffirmed for them decrees and laws. And Joshua recorded those things in the book of the law of God. I mean, this guy's serious about this with these. I'm just telling you, this is not a lighthearted deal. This isn't one of those things, hey, guys, I'm not going to be here a whole lot longer. We kind of got settled. Hey, I hope everything goes well. Good luck. Good luck. Hey, good luck, everybody. Nuh-uh. We didn't get here by accident. We're not in this moment here because we were lucky. We're in this moment here because there's a divine God, an eternal God who has a destiny for us that's much greater than we can even comprehend or imagine, and he has delivered us from slavery. He has protected us. He has guided us, and he's brought us to this point of freedom. And don't ever forget it. I'm going to write it down in the book. And then he goes on to do something else. Then he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak near the holy place of the Lord. See, he said to all the people, this stone will be a witness against us. It has heard. This stone has heard all the words the Lord has said to us. It will be a witness against you if you're untrue to your God. I mean, now this is one of those altar calls where Joshua's not playing any games, man. I mean, he's saying, look, come on down here. Sometimes you'd almost feel like in altar calls, people are trying to talk people into getting saved. I never really saw that from Jesus, and I didn't see that from Joshua. It's like, hey, you make a choice. You go ahead and you make a choice. Don't come down here flimsy, lighthearted, making a commitment. You make a choice, and that choice is get rid of the junk in your life. Get rid of the stuff that is killing you. Get rid of the stuff that's wrecking you. Get rid of that stuff and yield your heart to God. And if you're serious about it, are you serious about it? Okay, well, we're going to write this down right here. We're going to go ahead and write it down right now. And guess what? See that rock over there? We're going to take this rock and we're going to let it be a witness against you if you don't follow God. If you're not serious, you're playing games, that rock will be a witness. This is another one of those times when a rock's going to call out in the Bible. Whenever the Pharisees were going, shut up these people from praising you, Jesus, when he was coming in Palm Sunday, he said, you want to hear rocks sing? I'll quiet them down, but the rocks are going to sing. And Joshua is saying, guess what? That rock will speak against you in the day if you're not serious about your commitment. I will tell you, we live in a flimsy commitment kind of world today, folks. We do. And we have to battle. We have to battle against fickleness in our lives, fickleness in our commitment to God. And Josh, so I'm just going to ask you today, from this day forward, who are you going to serve? And you know what? Joshua, he went down hard on it. He's going, this is serious business. I want to give you a good word. If you read the rest of the chapter, you'll find out that this children of Israel, this group of people, while Joshua continued to live, then he died at 110. When he died, then the elders who were serving with him at that time, some of them were younger than him, until all of those elders had died, these people lived out their covenant. They lived out that commitment. So they did mean it, and they did follow through. Now there were generations came after him that were going like, what commitment? What God? What? But these people, they meant it, and they lived it out. And I thought that was a pretty good testimony to Joshua's appeal, I guess, in the hearts of the people, that they really, really were serious. From this day forward, we'll serve the Lord.